Welcome to another segment of Good Troublemakers. I'm Paki Wieland, your host, and today my guest is Karl Meyer. We named this for this after this program, after John Lewis, who invited us all to be good troublemakers. And Karl, I think you've answered the call. So I'm delighted to have you here, and I'm very curious to hear, and for our audience, actually, I know you've been on a number of different programs variously, but basically what I want us to focus on today is how you got to be a troublemaker.
Wow, big question, Paki. Can I just say that I'm honored to be on this show with one of the women who have been a leading troublemaker for generations now, and been leading the way for women to combat some of the horrible stuff we guys have been doing to the planet and warring and whatever. So thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you. So I first became aware of your work around the Connecticut River, and you're the person who really gave the call to remind us that living rivers flow downstream.
Except ours, yes.
So you're right now, and I know a number of people are aware, but some people aren't, of what you've done around the river, and why is the river so important to you? What's the big deal?
Well, some big questions here, and I think we have a little time to answer a few of them. I grew up along the rather mighty and short tidal Hackensack. The Connecticut River is a long tidal river. Well, I was the sort of just a couple of miles outside of New York City. The Hackensack River flows into Newark Bay. Just the old sludge fest, the sort of polluted. But that was our playground. It was literally, I lived on a couple of houses from River Road and across the river from Hackensack, New Jersey, on the Teaneck-Bogota border. And we'd go down there and we would just play in the muck, and we'd come up with all sorts of diseases that our parents would have to say, okay, you need to go to the doctor to see what that rash is or whatever. And that kind of stuck with me for a long time. I remember one of the things that really sort of got me sort of upset about rivers was I was maybe 8 years old or something, walking down to the river with my father and an uncle on like a Thanksgiving or Easter or something like that. Uh-huh. We took a walk down the river, and my uncle and my father were talking, and this was like a great uncle. So these were two generations, right? Uh-huh. And they were talking about having swam in the Hackensack River when they were kids. And I just remember something just came over me, and it just rankled me as a young person, thinking, you used to, and you were here, and these are your fathers, and why didn't you do something? And I think that stayed with me for a long time. I had kind of a crazy upbringing, but I eventually ended up as a transfer student to UMass because I just fell in love with the Connecticut River Valley after visiting. A sister and brother-in-law had moved up here. And there was this beautiful valley. I didn't know a lot about the river, but so I transferred up here really to live here, to be honest with you. Uh-huh. And I got involved in other things that sort of drew me into this. As soon as I got to UMass, I didn't even last a full year. I was a comparative literature major, very high-minded stuff. And Seabrook came along. Uh-huh. And we were trained, for nonviolence, and all of a sudden I was in with some of the great people from Northampton that trained us, and we got arrested at Seabrook, and we were in an armory for 13 days. And my education really skyrocketed by basically learning from those people, some of them who were Quakers, about how the world really works and how to protest. And then I eventually went back, and I didn't pay my $100 fine, and I spent another 10 days in New Hampshire, locked down and work farm. But meanwhile, and I don't want to ramble too much here, this was in the 1976 I arrived, and by 1980 or so, they had fixed the Holyoke Dam. They had improved the Holyoke Dam, and they were supposed to restore fish. That was the mandate, to restore fish to the Connecticut River. And the Holyoke Dam had this clunky fish elevator that had been working since 1955, and they had improved it. And I went down to Holyoke, and all of a sudden you were seeing hundreds of thousands of American shad and blueback herring and sea lamprey coming through. It was like this outdoor aquarium, and it just, my mind just kind of swam, and it just kept getting better and better. And meanwhile, 5 years before, they had federal Power Commission hearings in Boston, right? And they wanted to figure out, they needed to get fish all the way up to Bellows Falls, Vermont, where traditionally migratory fish, which fed Native Americans throughout time and farmers and everybody until 1798 when they built the Turnus Falls Dam. They needed to figure out how to get fish above Turnus Falls, and then above Vernon, and then to Bellows Falls, and restore them so that the public would have a source of recreational fishing. This was a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service mandate, National Marine Fisheries, and every state in New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. That excludes Maine and Rhode Island, I understand that. And what they did, just about 50 years ago now, they decided that they were going to build a series of fish ladders at Turnus Falls rather than this easy, simple elevator that just lifted fish up and put them upstream. And they took every fish that was coming up the Connecticut River, and about half of them every year that went past Holyoke would reach Turnus Falls, and they all got shunted in a canal. They had to go up 3 ladders, and only some years 1%, maybe 6% made it out, and they never owned it. They never told us that it didn't work. And basically what they did was they built fish ladders that were built on the Pacific coast. They were modeled on Columbia River fish ladders, giant river, yes, right? And they had 3 or 4 different species of salmon and also some transported American shad. And those fish went up those giant ladders, no problem. They scaled them down here, so they basically they wanted to create a salmon species that had been gone here since 1809. They spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on hatcheries. Nobody ever got past Turnus Falls. Vermont never got their fish. Franklin County never got our fish. We never got the seafood that we were supposed to get. Never reached Bellows Falls. And 50 years later, nobody ever told the truth. And we sit here with a river that is basically despoiled at Turnus Falls and the 20-mile reach between here in Franklin County at Turnus Falls, Montague, all the way up to Vernon, Vermont. 20-mile reach, 3 different states, and the river gets basically choked to death right here.
So let me go back. I appreciate this. So we started with your first engagement with Good Trouble,
yes,
in Seabrook, where you learned a lot, you said, from people. So you spent that...
Frances Crowe, being one of them, was in my armory, yes, so we have to honor her.
You know, it's so funny. You're the second person who's talked about that on this program, and you know the folly of the police, of the law enforcement people putting 1,400 people together for 2 weeks to do a lot of training, to do a lot of learning.
Yes. And
you all have certainly done that. You know, it worked. So thank you, the folly of the law enforcement people. Because I mean, we often look at our mistakes.
Right.
But that was, I think, one of theirs, because the more people I know who spent that time, I was one of the people who was the second wave. You know, there were 18 people, then there were 180 of us.
Yeah, you were on the ground floor, Paki.
And so I was just a support person for my affinity group. But so that was the first, the baptism, if you will, into civil disobedience.
And understanding this was all about the environment. I mean, I'm an environmental journalist, and that was one of the reasons why. Is just when you do something that is just so wrong and it's going to last for generations, for half a century. I mean, Seabrook is still operating. They want to keep relicensing these old plants. We still haven't had the arguments that we made before about what do you do with the waste, what do you do if there's... Yeah. We do not know. We have climate change that is creeping up the walls of New England, the shorelines, and one of these days a big storm is going to come. But it was environment, but it was also, but it was it gave me an understanding of politics as well, just being there. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, I think that you talk about the education you got during those 13 days. Yeah. That I think it was priceless. But now your self-description is an environmental writer.
Yeah.
And so you started being a writer at UMass, and then brought together that story. I mean, it's a very powerful story about your father and great uncle.
Yeah, it's interesting how things just sort of sink in there,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me, what it is that draws us to the river. And, your history with the Hackensack River. I grew up on the Mississippi River. And so I think there's an affinity we have for rivers.
And you're a Big Easy girl. I know that. A New Orleans woman here.
So those rivers we take for granted,
And right now, how many years? We're 20 years in from Katrina.
Yes, I know. We're just 20 years later. It was quite a catastrophe, but to go back to, I think, because this is part of your interest, the environment, and of course Katrina wouldn't have happened if we didn't have what we're having right now, what we're experiencing right now, this climate catastrophe that it's so easy to be blinded to. Yeah. But let's go back, because this is Karl Meyer, the good troublemaker, and because I think it's important for people, particularly today, to have understandings of people just like us. That Hannah Arendt book, the banality of evil. Her writings about
great way to think about it. Yeah.
Yes. So, but we also have the banality of good doers. These are not big things. Going to Seabrook was, it always takes courage to resist.
To step outside of the system.
To step outside and to call it out and to risk arrest. Right. I mean, some of us are more fortunate that we have some privilege. Our white skins, your maleness, all these things. So how do we use them?
I'll admit to that. I admit to the facts here.
So, but I think the question that one of the ongoing questions that certainly John Lewis didn't have to answer was so we have this privilege, and there's no way you get rid of it. So the question is, right. And you don't have to work at getting rid of it. The question, I think, for all of us is, how do we use it?
Right.
And so I think one of the things that, one of the ways you used it then in Seabrook was to go to Seabrook and risk arrest. And to get a benefit of a great education,
right? College level education. I will say that.
So,
absolutely.
So there's that, and then there's the further engagement with the environment, and calling out who was responsible for instead of having the elevator, putting the fish ladder in. Who was that? Who do we name? We
are talking about the exact same people that are here today. The exact same bureaucracies, right? The Federal Power Commission had to license, all the Northfield when they were building Northfield Mountain, and we are talking about Northfield Mountain, and that is the thing that always comes back to me. And can I just kick it back here for 1 second?
Oh, sure.
And the thing that I talk about most when I talk about the Connecticut River is the absolute horrific and strangling reversing damage done by the Northfield Mountain Pump Storage Station, which was put in to twin with the Vermont Yankee nuclear plant and was going to run off the excess energy there. But it was not examined beforehand, and it came online a year after the Clean Water Act happened, right? 1972 Clean Water Act got adopted by Congress. Northfield Mountain choked on its own water when they were trying to start it up in late 1972. April 1972, Northfield Mountain, they were going to start it up in the spring. It flooded. It flooded the whole thing, all the equipment, all the turbines, this giant powerhouse, it's football field long and I think, 50 feet tall. All that equipment, it flooded. They didn't come online, right? They didn't come online, and the Clean Water Act, October of that year, they didn't come online until next year, so they should have been, and they were subject to all of the Clean Water Act stipulations. And some of those things would have been protecting habitats. Some of those things might have been not letting a river be sucked backwards for miles at 15,000 cubic feet per second, not allowing a plant that is going to waste 34% baseline energy to just suck a river backwards and up into this monstrous reservoir that they exploded out of the top of the mountain, and then shoot it down at 20,000 cubic feet per second to make a few hours of energy that they get paid handsomely for. And when it comes down at that rate, it actually pushes water up towards Vermont, New Hampshire. So you have suction down at least a minimum of 3 miles, and you have a pulse that pushes it the other way. So we're talking miles of river, and virtually everything that gets sucked up into that plant for a round trip between those turbines, from fish eggs to larvae, to baby fish, to adult fish, there is no expectation of survival for anything. And that is the equivalent, and I've sort of figured this out that people can sort of visualize it, of 7 3-bedroom homes, all the aquatic life in that, every second, 15,000 cubic feet per second, 3,600 of those every hour for hours at a time.
Okay, we've all just glassed over.
Okay, good.
Too many numbers.
Get me back in here.
Too many numbers.
Get me back in. Save me.
So let's go back. Who were the bad guys?
Okay, they're still here today. Federal Power Commission is Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Okay, Federal Energy Regulatory.
That's
Commission,
what the 13
sometimes
year
called FERC.
Right. That is what the 13 years of all this relicensing business is supposed to be. And the license now is 7 years behind schedule. They are running on a license that expired in 2018. So you got FERC. Then you have something called ISO New England, the Independent System Operator, right? And they are in the background today. They weren't there at the time, but they are the people that sort of allows and sort of pushes to keep Northfield Mountain running so they can get a little juice out of it every day. It's basically a fail-safe sort of backup for a few hours of electricity if there was a giant failure New England-wide. We haven't had one since 2002. So there's ISO New England, but the big players were the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which was called the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries in the mid-'70s when they were deciding this and changed. National Marine Fisheries, which had another name at that time, the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and the Massachusetts DEP, which I'm sure I had another name, and they all went for this crazy salmon idea, which never produced a damn thing, a couple of hundred fish, and we spent hundreds of millions of dollars. The salmon were always coming. They have been gone since 1809, the year Darwin was born, on the southernmost river in New England that a cold water species, that particular cold water species, ever colonized in any way, and they were here because of something called the Little Ice Age, which was an aberration that was all the way across the globe, and you can find it in Western Europe, etc. And it was just a brief time when the ocean currents cooled, the salmon came down, they were opportunists, they had been here for a few hundred years, and by the time the dams got built, the planet was already warming up again, and now we're just We're just revolutionizing that.
So basically, you're saying that the river was too warm for salmon to be to want to come.
Let me make one point about
Sure.
that. Thank you for the question. I've done shows where I brought in. I actually have the Federal Power Commission hearings in Boston. I actually have the historical document, and one of the last things that was asked about when they were talking about salmon was whether they thought that Long Island Sound temperatures were cool enough. They were already thinking about this. Were cool enough to support salmon, and of course, the salmon enthusiasts. Of course, it is. They were already this is 1975, and they were already that question was already out there. If you don't start on the edge of anything that's extinct, you go to the middle and you try to save what's there. You know, I forget Aldo Leopold. You know, you save all the working parts.
Yes.
And they decided, let's start the crossword puzzle from this side middle piece here. Never was going to work, and experts have come up to me and said it was never going to work later on.
But I'm still caught on something, and perhaps our listeners, our viewers
Please.
are too. And that is, so in Holyoke there was this elevator that worked. Why didn't they do that all the way up?
Why indeed, Paki? Well, first of all,
was it financial?
No. No, I don't think so at all, because it costs a lot of money. It costs millions of dollars to and the power company agreed with this. And part of the reason I would maybe surmise is because it let them leave a portion of the river empty in front of the dam, right? They widened the Turner's Falls Power Canal to have its own reservoir so they could get a second pulse of energy. They could repulse what Northfield Mountain does. They do a surge, they do a pumping, and they get another pulse of energy. And they basically left for months and months. There's almost no water in that river. So there's that. The other reason was they just went crazy for salmon, right? So, you think, okay, this worked on the Columbia, and you have all these guys that want to do the fancy fly fishing,
Sure.
These were a lot of the people that are doing this are sort of the elite bureaucrats, and there have been law cases going back into the 1800s about fish passage. This was a big deal when the mills came out. But judges were making these decisions, and judges like that. And these are people that could go and have a cabin up in the Maine woods or go to Canada. So they did that. The other piece of this is Vernon Dam, which was just above Turner's Falls. They didn't really necessarily need a lift there because it was a smaller height to sort of surmount there. They were the cliffs, and so the falls at Vernon were surmounted by a pretty good fish ladder, which worked for everybody. And believe it or not, of all the fish that come past Turner's Falls, and there are very few, the percentage of 8 or 10, but sometimes they've been up to 60,000. I think one year was the best year. Once they get past the horrors of Turner's Falls, and they reach Vernon, they virtually, I think it's been up to 70% of those fish can scoot up that ladder towards Turner's Falls. So it always worked. And then we had this thing that we never talked about. That they wrecked the idea of a basic fish lift. Holyoke has been the most effective and successful fish passage on the entire East Coast. 720,000 American shad were passed there in 1992, I believe. 640 blueback herring, I think, and that was the mid-'80s. I mean, those windows were filled with fish. These days, blueback herring, I don't know if we got 3 dozen this year. We might have got 60. Shad, we had a decent year at Holyoke, but we've never even got past this 59,000 we got in 1992.
So what comes up? Where do they go from Holyoke up the river?
Holyoke. Then the next thing they do is they meet the project. They meet the three ladder abomination that is Cabot Station, which is a little lower on the river. That's the basic hydro. That's the hydro that we all think of, water that goes downstream through turbines and it goes back. And that's actual hydro. Or they can come up to the dam, and if they can find their way, if they keep the levels high enough, there's another ladder that they have to find an entrance to. Then they have to get to a third ladder that takes them the final step across. And fish get in there, and it would take them, they would mill around for virtually weeks. And they exhaust themselves, and they'd never get up there. And this was all this open habitat. What's going to open? We have wasted 53 years of not having, and people knew about this, and they never attacked it. Can I just show you a little diagram, or you want to get a question in here first?
No, go ahead. Show them the diagram.
I don't want to get
show
ahead of you.
Show us the diagram.
This is, and this has been here on GCTV before, but if you look at this, this is a Franklin County industrial park and Franklin County High School or whatever. So Turners Falls Dam would be down here, and you're going upriver, and then you come back to here, and this is the French King Bridge, and this is going up towards Northfield. Vernon Dam is way up here. Turners Falls Dam is way down there. And so the river, for 12,000 years, well, say, flowed this way, downstream towards the Atlantic Ocean, for, say, 12,000 years. And then something called Northfield Mountain came around. And this is what's happening to the Connecticut River today. This is from ISO New England's ISO New England real-time energy mix. You can just Google that, and you get up to the second information about what's running the power grid. So it used to be when Vernon and there was Millstone and there was Haddam Neck, there were all these nuclear plants. A lot of this used to be nuclear. This is our kids' future. This is what it's taking to pump a river backwards and up a hill for a few hours of energy. This is all natural gas. And this was about a month ago, a little more than a month ago, this was 60-something% and 16% nuclear. Today it was 63% natural gas. There's your kids' future going up in smoke. And 24% natural gas at 10:30 today. This little bit is actual hydro right there. This is what they call renewables, and some of what they consider renewable energy is burning wood and burning refuse. So this is what you're doing to literally choke and reverse a Connecticut River. Okay? So I don't know if hopefully that's a little illustration for people. I'm going to let you talk for a minute.
Well, no, I think those. I think it's good information to have.
Yeah.
Primarily, I think, because Northfield Pump Station claims it is what is it? It's
they like to call themselves pumped hydro. They like to put hydro in the name.
It produces hydroelectricity.
It's a gas plant.
Yes, and we know, and you have said, and my friends with the Connecticut Valley River Defenders and others have said and highlighted it time and again that this is false. It is not a clean energy source. Even if it did not suck anything out of the river, it is still not a clean energy source. So on both counts, it's
a consumer.
It is just
34% waste baseline before it, and that energy goes through ISO New England, and every day they can bid energy out as far as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, New York State, Canada. It's not about us, and it never has been.
Right.
Okay, this is environmental injustice, and this is also the fault of our Boston politicians.
So we can point the finger to a number of different places. Now, right now, it's up for relicensing, and as you noted, it's 7 years late.
So well, they got a 7-year relicensing already. Let's put it that way.
So what's your prognosis? What's going to happen?
Well, my prognosis, I've always been saying this. I've always been calling for its shutdown. The Connecticut River Conservancy, National Marine Fisheries, American Rivers. This thing has been operating for 53 years. Mm-hmm. People know what it does. The Watershed Council is 74 years old, and if you have river in the name of your organization, and you are sitting on this, and you have either gotten into the game long ago or a few years ago and didn't put enough skin in the game to be screaming about a river that runs in reverse against all nature, then you are failing this. And that's been my focus since 2012, when my first question was about the river running backwards. My prognosis, Paki, unless a rabbit gets pulled out of a hat, unless a lawyer pops up and says, "Karl, we're gonna take you under our wing, and we're gonna throw ourselves at this," there will be a license. There's still a Department of Environmental Protection Mass Water Quality Certificate that has to be signed before Federal Energy Regulatory Commission will license the plant. First Light, which is owned by a global company, public sector pension investments, 250 billion plus, just London, Tokyo, I can't remember where they're from. They just came here in 2016 and broke all the promises that had been made in the, we're going to do this, we're going to have a combined license. And they split up their assets. They moved their registration to Delaware to be tax exempt. They're pulling back taxes from the local Franklin Regional Council of Government towns, and they want to be seen now. We're all a big company town now, Paki. They're negotiating with the town of Montague for payments in lieu of taxes for 10 years. Let's go to the company store and buy whatever they put in front of us, right? So I'd like to give you a little better shot at, this is going to get shut down or whatever. There will be some improvements, but they're all backdated. So maybe a decade from now, maybe 2037, when the kids that knew their parents were starting on this will be driving and have graduated college. They may put in place the fish lift that should have been put in place there in 1980. They're going to put in a fish net up by Northfield for a few months out of the year that is not going to do anything for all the fish eggs and larvae and young of the year of 24 species, not just the migrants, not just the fish that we're supposed to feed us, that we're supposed to be eating. And people are basically, the big players and the small players are mostly playing for parting gifts because they talk about erosion behind Turner's Falls Dam and putting a little bit more water in front of Turner's Falls Dam. And some of it is for the sake of recreational people, which I don't really care. You can put a canoe in on any river, but that should not. This is a 410-mile long ecosystem that is virtually choked to death and has all the natural characteristics of a river taken out of it right here in Franklin County, affecting 3 different states. So there will be a new license at some point. First Light, PSP Investments have worked hard, and the DEP to get me thrown out of the water quality certificate protest that I've made. They've done their best to sideline me, but I'm still in the game. I'm still hanging in there. But yeah, I've been sort of singled out because I've told the truth for all this time. And I actually worked at Northfield Mountain. I was on the safety committee for half a year or so.
Well, tell us about that. Did you know what they were doing when you started to work there?
It was kind of interesting. I was working at Massachusetts Audubon out in eastern Massachusetts, out in South Natick, and I missed the Connecticut River terribly, right? But I went to Antioch, New England. We're both graduates, Paki, and so I got a job and I worked out in eastern Mass, and I was out in Rhode Island for a while, delivering eggs for Little Rhodey egg farms. Anyway, I wanted, there were 2 reasons. I missed the Connecticut River Valley terribly, and there was also a relationship that I was coming back to. And the only job, there were 2 jobs that came up, and one was for the American Farmland Trust, which I came in second for or something, and this job at Northfield, and it was like, it was just there, right? It was at the recreation center, so it sort of, so I sort of had to fit in there, but you had to sort of like, I wonder what they'll think about somebody. This is Northeast Utilities back in the day, right? This is,
yes.
And I wonder what they're going to find out about Seabrook, who they were invested in, whatever. But I passed all the tests, and I ended up there for 6.5 years or so.
Oh.
Which was, it was hard for me from day one. But it gave me some opportunities. I was on the radio, did nature notes on WRSI for a couple of years. And it gave me a little exposure, but it wore me down, but I learned so much about the river. And, in the end, you just start to know things. And this was back in the day of Enron and stuff, and they were making crazy money during the Enron thing. All of a sudden they call them wash free trades, and the management people would come down and say they were making $1 million overnight out of that plant. This is back in 2002, So anyway, so that is how I kind of ended up there. And then I started looking at the river. And I used to, every now and then they would let me go down to Holyoke when one of the fishway guides was sick. And I loved going down to Holyoke, but they wouldn't let me talk at Turner's Falls because I would tell the truth, right? So, but it just wore me down. These jobs, they're kind of well paid. There wasn't enough to do. There were like too many managers and not enough people to boss around. And in the wintertime, there was never any snow. They had cross-country skiing, and they'd be open for 2 weeks. And it's like, so eventually I thought, I need to get out of here. I'm going to die. But before I got out of there, I was already talking about this. I was still writing. I was writing for Mass Audubon Sanctuary magazine about river stuff. Uh-huh. And the first day I landed at Northfield, there was an issue called Over the Dam. And John Howard, the manager, came out. Is that you? I said, yeah. He goes, well, someday I'm going to change your mind about this stuff, because I said, nobody knows why the fish aren't passing Turner's Falls was part of the article. And John, you never did. And about 7 years later, well, I got to ask John. I said, John, a friend of mine, Boyd Kennard, says he was fishing with his kid down by the Turner's Falls underneath the French King Bridge one day, and his boat started to go backwards. Is it true that the Connecticut River actually sucks the river backwards for a mile? And John, very nice gentleman. Karl, when we draw from all directions. It was a very nice denial. And it took another 4 or 5 years of studies until they actually had to come out with the schematic that I showed you. Uh-huh. That's miles. That's a minimum of 3 miles sucking the river backwards underneath that bridge and all the way. And we don't know exactly how far, because they only had to do 5-kilometer segments, so that's 3 miles. The river is still going backwards beyond the end of that. And it also does that when the river's at 181 feet level at the, so it's not the only time. And this is hours. Yeah. Hours, Paki. Everything that's sucked in. Yes. Has no expectation of surviving. Yeah.
So this has taken a lot of your time and energy to fight this. This is my yes. What do you call it? This is my Sisyphean. Somebody. Boyd Kennard once asked me. I told him I had some big disagreements. I worked for the Watershed Council for a while as well. I told him I can't do it anymore. And he goes, you sure? He said, what about your career? I said, listen, somebody has got to stay outside the system, because otherwise it doesn't get out there. And so that's why I do the journalism I do. And that's why I say the stuff that people are unwilling to do. And that's why I do it the way I do, because a lot of it's been on editorial pages, because I have to keep editors' confidence that I'm telling the truth, so I have to have facts. And I've always hung out there and waited for them to sue me, right? Little what do they call those suits that, the easy suits that they shut your mouth suits? Yes. They never could. And I don't have to go and get the spokesperson's observation and throw that in there as that's part of the news, because it's not. All of this stuff gets done in secret behind non-disclosure agreements. And that's how the deals get done. So I just want to acknowledge that good trouble that you've gotten yourself into, and to really appreciate that the research you've done, the thoroughness of your attack on that power plant, if you will.
I call it a monster, an electric toilet, which it is.
Well,
literally.
Yes. So I think it's really important, and I hope our viewers are paying attention to this because particularly in this day and age, I think we need to really be aware of the thoroughness necessary in our work we're doing, to really do the kind of work that you've done. That doesn't look like it's necessarily troublemaking. It's getting published in good journals, but it is really troublemaking because you're stirring them up. You're not letting them off the hook.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I'm going to brag a little bit about myself here, which is kind of unseemly.
Oh, wait,
I understand.
A little.
But just before around 2010, I used to go to. I still go to all the. There's something called the Atlantic Salmon Commission that actually does all the research on the Connecticut River. The agencies, National Marine Fisheries, U.S. Fish, and all the state agencies meet.
Wait,
they decide what's going to go on.
You said salmon.
Yes, it's gone. They changed the name. Just 2 years ago, they finally changed the name. We haven't seen a salmon in years now, right? So I've gone to these meetings. There's 4 a year, and you have to go, but just as we were creeping up, and everybody has known for the last 50 years that there was going to be a new relicensing, right? And just as we were creeping, I was at one of these meetings, and I found out that the guy named John Warner from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they have an office in Concord, had been meeting secretly with First Light. It was I think it was Northeast Utilities 2010 then. Anyway,
yes.
It might have been GDF Suez, but it might have been already First Light. Been meeting secretly about constructing a fish lift at Cabot Station, which is downstream, which would have conveniently for the power companies. This is all being done in secret.
Yes.
Conveniently started the idea of putting those fish back into a power canal again and not restoring the river, right? And this has all been about river restoration for me. You put water in the river, the fish go up a river, and that's how it works. That's how it worked at Holyoke. And I'm at this meeting, and my jaw dropped. I said, John, this is John Warner, U.S. He's retired now. Do you have any notes on that you can give me or whatever? And one of the other U.S. fish, Bill Archambault, goes, Karl, you're going to have to FOIA that. And my jaw dropped. I said, well, the other thing I mentioned, I said, and you've been talking about this while there's an endangered sturgeon that is in the river right there, and there's no public input. And that was it. You're going to have to FOIA it. So I put that out in the op-ed pages, and I had a blog at that time, and it went away. And so that's at least why we're talking. We're not talking about a canal restoration, at least. We're talking about a river restoration. We're talking about water in the river. And that's what you get from just showing up. As Woody Allen said, life, 90% of life, just showing up. If that hadn't happened, we might be talking about just putting all those fish as soon as they hit 3 miles below Turners Falls Dam, going back into that damn canal again where they never came out of. And yet the power company, this giant corporation, is still getting its way. 7 years of a free license. This is basically, hey, you got a 7-year license. You just get played along.
The other thing that that when I thought about you, I thought about what you're talking about right now, and you can both chew gum and walk at the same time, obviously, because you've got this major focus of the Northfield Mountain and the river,
right.
Our beloved river. But also now you've really latched onto something else, and that is what's happening to this country. Under the administration of the Trump White
administration.
House. Yes, and I was curious about that, and want our viewers to know that this is something else that's in the works. So tell us about this. How did you come to decide with all the ills that are going on, from Gaza to Social Security to to this this tracking down of so-called enemies. So what's the Karl Meyer response?
I guess that goes back a ways too, but as a journalist, the assault on the Bill of Rights, the freedom of the press, the right to vote, religion, what are the four, and then everything else, due process, all the Bill of Rights stuff. But the press freedoms and speech have always been sort of front and center with me. And, this hasn't been the only thing that I've been somewhat active in or writing in, I don't think anymore it's as an independent journalist, as long as you're upfront about what you're saying, you don't have to sit on the sidelines and play like, okay, this is neutral. And one of the things that, and I know that you have been doing this, but when the Iraq War came around, 23 years ago now, I don't know.
Yes.
I started standing out on the Greenfield Town Common, right? Because we were lied to about weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
And we had a war that just went on and on. And so I stood with a lot of people, and and I've been doing that for these last 20 some odd years. And everybody has their different skew on things. We all don't feel exactly the same way about everything, but it was always about peace and justice. And when the Iraq War came around, this is 2009, the surge or whatever, it just droned on and on. And all of a sudden there'd be some opposition that would show up and try to sort of be disruptive, which is going to happen again, of course. Here in Greenfield, there were two counselors that were on the head of the city council that decided that they didn't really like the 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock peace part of the vigil there. And they had to move us off the public square, the town square. They wanted to move us to the edge of town, out by the high school, or this little square that's down by Toyota down there. And one of them was a lawyer. That was the head the head of the city council. There were two of these, and that just poked me right in the eye. And I just said, "Oh no!" And we had to go and fought to open that common up. And now we have anybody can go there, and anybody can protest peacefully and stand on those corners. And I just said to myself at that time, I'm never going to not be here, because nobody is ever allowed to take away your right to free speech and be in the public square and a free press. And so I'm out there pretty much every Saturday that I can make it. So there's Constitution involved in all this stuff. And I've written a few things. I've written a few op-eds about free speech and the horrors that are going on about due process and the racism. But right now, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
We're not in France, but the French people would know what to do under a situation like this. But isn't it the province of a free people? When their government is attacking their basic rights, wouldn't it be the province of a free people who believe in democracy to deploy to the capital of their country and flood the zone like this sort of maniacal dictator has been doing with spray painting the country with these little brush fires? Wouldn't that be something that would make some sense?
Oh, I certainly think so, yes.
So that is my thinking, and we just don't seem to get it that that's where the war is.
We certainly know it's interesting. You talk about the brush fires variously. That I think it's everywhere in the country,
yes,
and it's practically in the world because of that outreach, or the overreach, if you will. But I'm concerned, or curious more about what we do and where. I mean, I have to commend people who have agreed to be first responders because ICE is here. ICE is all over the country, arresting innocent people. And I think, and I want to applaud you for the work you've done locally, and others who are certainly engaged in everything all the different issues. Particularly, I think I've had a number of people on this program talking about Israel and Palestine, and our complicity in the genocide.
May I?
Sure.
Bombing today. Aid workers, hospital, people killed. A second bombing in the response. Journalists, Reuters, Associated Press, Al Jazeera, independent journalists were killed in both ends of that. The aid workers were killed and the innocent people were killed. And how that is, those are our weapons that get sent to Israel, but that's another thing. You make people get used to having the military around. I never saw an officer on regular patrol through the Greenfield Public Library as long as I've lived here, my 2 decades plus in Greenfield. And sometimes there are 2. And, I'm sure it's a comfort for the librarians because I love those people. And, they are having to take up a lot of the slack of social services because people have nowhere to go. But the idea now that there are, all of a sudden, not till the Trump administration do you see these people out on the streets. On my way up here, there was a Franklin County Sheriff's deputy standing in front of the new patrol station that's downtown Greenfield, which has, by the way, an all-seeing light. We have allowed ourselves to become a surveillance society. So there's a nice young guy. He's a Franklin County. He goes, "How you doing?" I said, "Good. How's the surveillance going?" As I walked by, and he goes, "Surveillance," and I just kind of waved. But that's it. That's and basically you're right. It is, we as a country are allowing them to make war on the Constitution, but it's also a war on justice. It's a war on the poor. It's a war on black and brown people. It's a war on the people that we refuse to see, that were putting the food on our tables. We were happy to exploit them as good privileged liberals or whatever, and so we have played our part in this. But the horrific way that we are now becoming it sort of starts to look like Stasi. It starts to look like stormtroopers. How can you have masked police on the streets of American cities? How can you allow people not to have masks on to patrol your streets?
Well, I think those are the questions, and so yes, those are so. How do we stop that? And I think that's the question, and that's one of the
you flood their zone.
So tell me about your thoughts on that.
Why aren't we there already, Paki? I suggested to our fine Jim McGovern. During the first 100 days, why aren't you dragging the delegation to Washington and just reading the Bill of Rights and the Constitution on the steps of the Supreme Court? But why don't we just swarm the Capitol as good citizens that believe in democracy? And are we going to wait around until it's all the puzzle pieces are in place? They would not do this in France, right? They've been taken over a few times, and they know how to shut down the Capitol. The only question, Paki, and this is kind of an ugly one, is will the U.S. military shoot their own citizens on command? And that's a really ugly kind of thing to think about.
Well, that was a proposal of this current president in his last administration with Black Lives Matter. Unfortunately, he had people in his administration who said, "No, you can't do that." I think the idea of flooding the zone. I think the idea of people going. I laugh when you said the people of France, because I often say, the thing with the French Revolution was they had guillotines and we never did. But
Paki has an excellent sense of humor. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get there today.
but I think, and I'm not suggesting, it's too late for guillotines now, but that the French Revolution was truly a revolution, and there are those who argue that ours was really a counter-revolution. But we have good documents, and we have great aspirations, and those documents really, I think, are what inform my aspirations. when I think
Yes.
we
You're
could,
a patriot.
we could be
Damn
something.
it.
Yes,
Or a matriot, whatever we want to
well,
say.
you can call us patriots. We could be. Women could be patriotic too.
Yes. Yeah.
We have the vote. Right now.
I think men should get it. There's been a question around, should men get the vote? Lately, it's sort of like,
But I think, the idea of really going to D.C. and really flooding and not leaving is a very important issue to raise or possibility, because I think many of us just walk around scratching our heads saying, well, what in the world are we going to do? What can we do? Right now, it would be silly to go to Washington because everybody's on vacation from this.
Okay, that's today.
But
that's
next week,
today.
After Labor Day, when everything goes back to, quote, normal.
That is today. There are emergencies where you just save your country, and I just think, we went through the first 100 days and, the sky is falling. We went through the second 100 days. The sky is still falling. And every day he changes the subject and threatens somebody else while Israel goes on and Ukraine goes on. And our rights, we just get used to the boiling water, the simmering water, and we cannot let it go on for a year, Paki. I don't believe that we can survive if this sort of goes on. It's just that we expect our leaders to lead us, and they're not. They're handcuffed in some ways. We have some good politicians out there and people willing to speak up, but the people need to lead at some point. The people, and there are organizers. I've never been an organizer. That's never been my strong suit. But the idea and your idea, we need to hold tight to that Bill of Rights and the Constitution.
Yes, and I think that's part of what this whole invitation to and the whole thrust of getting in good trouble is about, that now more than ever we need people to get in good trouble.
Absolutely.
And to be creative. I often use that phrase, the opposite of violence is not nonviolence. The opposite of violence is creativity. And that's the call I put out to our viewers each time we do this, and to ourselves, to how can we creatively confront this assault on us, the assault on the Constitution, the assault on especially, the assault on the Constitution is a theoretical thing that we see played out, because that assault is on living human beings, is on the most vulnerable people in our country right now.
And the great promise of America was that we were going to take care of people. Come to us.
Give me your poor, your tired.
Right, and we continue to hold up this television image of this great shiny thing. And it is not true in a way that it should be. And the restoration of that depends on the willingness of people. We owe this to generations to come. That's where the fight is.
So you called me a patriot, and I'll call you one, and I'll call every one of you who's watching this to also be patriots, to aspire to everything good in those documents that we stand on. Because if we don't do that, we won't have it anymore. This experiment will have failed.
Yeah.
And it is teetering.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you for having that soul in there, Paki.
Well, I think we need to do this, and as you said, so you're not the organizer. There are people who are organizing variously around the country, and I think it's important for us to look at what we do. You're a good researcher, Karl. You do really good work, and you have a good conscience, and that's what really leads us to do the kind of work we do.
Correct.
It's and it's to also find other people, because we need community. We need one another. One person standing in front of the Supreme Court is nothing. Is a madman. But 100,000 of us there makes a difference. And I think as we look at different ways we're going to mobilize now that I think it's really dawned on us how bad it is that we're done. So you, I, and everybody who's watching this, be aware that we can make the difference. Remember that little story of the mosquito. If you think you're too small, have you ever tried to go to sleep at night with that mosquito buzzing around? Well, we can be mosquitoes, we can be red ants, we can be anything we want, but basically we can be resistance, and there are actually more of us than we think.
And what was, I do like the Margaret Mead quote that, it starts with one person, but
Yes.
it doesn't end there. But it starts with
Here,
you.
here. Yes.
Thank you, Paki. It has been an honor.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure having Karl Meyer as my guest today, a good troublemaker.